a ZBrush Live with Creature Sculpt, and one, it was 3 hours and 45 minutes, and I think it was that long because the artist doing it just kept chatting with people in the chat. And I was like, "Are you gonna make something? What's going on here?" But if you wanna watch people sculpt, it is a good. Start watching speed sculpts and such. It's a great way to kind of get you used to watching someone create shape. You know, what shapes do they target first? What brushes are they targeting? And sometimes they're sped up, right? Time lapses, but you can keep track of what they're doing and where they're going first. So it is something, if you want some background noise, I would recommend that. But she was saying, she was talking about turning on symmetry and changing to the X, Y, or Z axis. And I was like, you're not. You should be using that. You have zero accent. So maybe it's just becoming cool. I only heard it from my buddy from South Africa. He was, yeah.
People say Z.
Z. Z. The Z. Yeah. So I'm just going to bring up one that's already set up, right? This was, this is going to be this guy here, and I'm just going to build him again. So remember, you wouldn't have anything, and I'm going to actually start with a new tool anyway. So I'm going to clear my canvas, Command N. So if you ever run into a problem with something, you stamp down a surface more than once, and you don't have, you just want to clear and start over, Command N. Also, my images are in here, and they will stay in here. So even though I'm out of draw mode, I'm going to bring in a sphere, drop that down, edit, and it is not a poly mesh yet. Now you can start right out of the gate with a Dynamesh sphere. You can grab those through the light box, but I like to go through the whole taking a surface and making a Dynamesh, right? Just to kind of work that or show that workflow. So if you know how to do that, that's great. Okay, Shift P. I'm going to go ahead and bring back that, and now we're ready to start shaping this to our wireframe. And what is important, just like any other build, make sure that your images are lined up. They are centered as best as they can be. Pick what side you're going to be following. I would recommend following, I guess it would be our left side, their right side, because when we get into mirroring, that's the side it pulls from, is this side over here. Now this guy, he has one pant leg and one pant leg off. I'm going to model the pant leg because that's the side I'm following. Some people have questions. They select characters that have robotic arms and limbs. I'm okay with you pulling the symmetrical parts for this week. Next week, you would be establishing the mechanical parts of that structure. So, but this week it can be 100% symmetrical. Another thing that I tend to notice, I don't want to see anything in pose other than A pose or T pose. Right? I can get some people that still keep their characters leaning or swinging a sword or whatever. I'm like, no, not going to work out. That could go against the completion. Okay. And have I explained the completion grade? Because yeah. Okay.
3 for completion, 3
for Two are the ones I grade. So whatever ones you want to spend a little bit more time on, maybe you're pre-thinking into week 2. You spend a good amount of time on the 2. I grade those technical aspects of your build and visual aspects. The other 4 get graded for completion. And so make sure they're complete. We talked about what counts as complete and what doesn't. So maybe help you manage some time with that. All right. So, and also you saw that the due date was moved to Tuesday. Okay, to account for the day. I'm not going to move week 2 because if we keep steamrolling into the weeks, it's going to hurt, right? So we'll see how everything's going and whatnot when the time comes. All right, so I'm just going to go in here, BMV, get ready to move, and I can shrink this down if I want, right? Start with something a little bit smaller. I can scale it up. And I haven't done any Dynamesh anything yet, right? I'm just kind of positioning this. Okay, situating a little bit. But now we will get into Dynamesh. I'm going to hide my actual thing. So from the Cactus build video, who can tell me how Dynamesh works the resolution slider? Like, what's important about that? So I'll give you a hint. If I've got this asset, and next to it I've got the same shape, but it's 5 times larger than that asset, and I set the resolution slider to the same exact setting, so 128 is default, why would the larger asset end up with 5 times as much geometry than the smaller asset at the same exact Dynamesh setting?
Because it's adding more topology to compensate for that bigger size.
Okay, it kind of goes, that is technically correct, right? It's looking at how many grid units does this asset fill up. And if you look at Dynamesh and you kind of look at how it works, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn Dynamesh on 128. Probably going to be a little bit much for the beginning. But if you look at how Dynamesh works, it is shooting a grid of topology. Takes like a cube, 6 planes, and it shoots a grid at your model. Okay, and wherever those shapes cross over, you get the wonky triangulated topology, right? That's where the model changes plane from side to front or front to top or whatever. So you're going to get that. So when you have 128 by 128, it's looking at your grid unit per square centimeter, and it's saying, I'm going to put 128 by 128 here, 128 by 128 here. So if your model is 1 grid unit, you're going to get less topology than a model that's 10 grid units at the same exact set. That's important to understand. You can kind of understand why a smaller model, your resolution slider needs to be up higher, whereas a larger model, your resolution slider tends to be a little bit lower because you're getting more bang for the buck at a lower resolution. Or if you're working small, and size in here really is relative, but if you're working small and you want more resolution, right, because this will cap out. There's only so much resolution you can get. So if you need more resolution, your model needs to grow. You need to make your model bigger so you can get more out of each square centimeter than you are. Does that make sense? Right? So it kind of helps you figure out where you're going with it. But so now we're in Dynamesh, and I'm actually going to undo that. I'm going to bring this down because I like a little bit less topology in the beginning. We're going for larger forms first. And then I'm going to bring up my wireframe. And we're just going to start moving things around. Remember, keep your perspective off. He does not line up. His trapezius do not line up. I'm going to try and favor the front as much as I can to make sure I get that structure when I need to. Look at it from the top. His shoulders should be back a little bit. So we're going to pull that back. Remember, always thinking about cross sections. Right? The stuff that you're learning in your speed sculpts. How's everybody doing on the speed sculpts? Okay. I can go through that a little bit today, kind of show you maybe an alternative way of approaching those versus, like, is everybody working with the skeleton?
Yes.
Okay. All right, cool. Did Christian go through that? Kind of demonstrate that? Okay, good. I was worried because he's newer to teaching the first part of our class. All right, so if he did that, then I don't want to do it. Oh yeah, I mean, why not? It'd be like building a car without a frame, you know? What do you think? Yeah. It's you're not building this, you're not turning in the skeleton. Now, using a pre-built torso, that's a problem. But using the skeletal structure or the skull when you're shaping out the heads in week 2, probably a good idea. Yeah. Assets, right? Work.
Smart.
No. Problem. And thank you for asking, because it's a very valid thing to be. Okay, so I'm going through here, and again, I'm not looking for too much of anything being completed, right? But I always like to work, update, full shape, update. I'm no longer, important to understand that when you're working with Dynamesh, you're not working with subdivisions anymore. You don't take your Dynamesh and then subdivide. We're working with Dynamesh, so if we need more resolution, we have more resolution. Yes?
Just to make sure, what's the key to update Dynamesh to keep refreshing so the active workflow?
Control, click and dragging your scene. It's the exact same keystroke and motion as clearing a mask. So some people ask, well, can you mask an area and only Dynamesh is part of your model? And the answer is no, because you have to clear the mask first so it can Dynamesh everything. So, yes, good question. Now the other thing you can do, and what some people do, which I don't remember, they turn Dynamesh on and off again. And if you ever notice that Dynamesh is not updating for you, you have to kind of hold shift and just kind of tap the surface. It needs to see a change in component position for Dynamesh to update. So if I were like, hey, I need more resolution, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up, control, click, and swipe, and you see nothing happens. It didn't change because it didn't do anything. But if I hold shift, click on the surface just ever so lightly, now I get more geometry, right? So it needs to see a change before it can Dynamesh. I think I was at 72. 72 is going to be pretty good for a lot of things. All right, and I am thinking about future maneuvers. So if you want to kind of shape as you go, it's not really that bad. Right? Whereas in Z-spheres, you're not shaping and moving, right? You're establishing your whole structure, then shaping. It's more of a stage process. This is one where, kind of like in Maya, as I'm building a structure and cutting topology, I'm shaping it as I build. It's kind of the same thing here. As I'm working with it, if I said, you know what, I want to come in here and do a little bit on the torso, I'll probably just stay with the torso. I can come here and say, you know what, I want to, shape the belly a little bit or something like that. I want to soften out the pec transition to the side. I want to pull lats. And I want to make sure that my trapezius are starting to become identified. Start pulling some pec structure. We can start pushing in the back. The scapular is going to be running there. Start pulling lats out. Alright, just kind of taking care of some things before we get too far. Now I can rotate around. We feel a little bit of an indent. We can look at it from the top and say, all right, do we feel that drop back, and then the proper shapes we should be having. Okay, and then just gonna update. Always update. We'll do some more update. Now we're going to get into the appendages, and there's a lot of different ways for appendages. One is just pull your topology, make your brush a little larger, pull your topology. Dynamesh. Okay, and you start working this way. One problem with this, though, is, and Dynamesh is really known for, if I make my brush, a lot of people work with too small of a brush, and they start pulling. And they're just doing too much work. Yes. Just kind of working with it. And they're like, awesome, yay. And And then they Dynamesh, and if, let's do this at a lower resolution. Let's say you're at a lower resolution.
One resolution.
Oh, it's gonna give it to me. I need to go a little bit more. Trying to see if I can get it to pancake together. Oh, I'm just so good, it won't work. No, I'm just kidding. Let's do this. Maybe? No? Still? Pancake. You get pancake? Still no pancake. Okay. Trying to, a lot of people get it. There we go. We got some pancake. Okay. So a couple things you're going to hear. One is Swiss cheese, right? Swiss cheese is when your model is too close together, and when you Dynamesh it, it fuses vertices from the front and back together, and it creates holes in your model. Okay, that's a problem. And the other one is pancaking, which is this. This is when you pull too much, the model gets too thin, and it doesn't have the resolution to maintain the thickness. This is always something to think about. Anybody that's working in Photoshop and you start trying to paint a detail that you don't have pixels for, it's the same thing. So when you get into fingers, if you were to say, I want to do fingers this week, which remember, you just need a mitten hand, and you're working with a 32 by 32 resolution, and basically think about it, if the polygon is larger, if the polygon sizes are larger than the gap or detail you're trying to create, you're not going to be able to get it. So all your fingers will mesh together. And if you're making an aquatic character, maybe that's good, but chances are people are not doing that. So if I can get this to Swiss cheese, that'd be awesome. I'm going to try. I'm going to try my hardest. Just to do something. It's starting to pinch together. A little bit, but it's not giving me the holes. But anyway, one thing to understand about Dynamesh is it's very forgiving. It's scary at first. It's kind of like a Sour Patch Kid, right? It's scary at first because it does some weird stuff, but then it gets sweet, and you're like, okay, that's not too bad. So what happens with Dynamesh is, if you run into a problem or you notice that something isn't working the way it's supposed to, going up in resolution is not going to fix this. All right, so let's go up a little bit higher. Back to surface. Oh, there we go. Swiss cheese. Because now I have the capability, I guess, resolution-wise, to hold that shape. So how do we fix something like that? Because that's very scary if you see that. Well, you got to understand the Valley of Suck first. The Valley of Suck, Ryan Kingsland, he talks about this all the time, and a lot of artists, especially, it's hard for instructors, because that it takes time to really get a good shape. So sometimes we're doing a demonstration, we're like, yeah, just kind of pull this, and people are like, well, that looks terrible. It's going to get there, trust me. But as an artist, your model usually falls into that Valley of Suck, right? Whether it's you as an artist at that point in time or just the evolution of a model, it usually gets worse because you're just pulling shape to get something on screen. Then you refine. And what he talks about is he always says it's important to get out of that valley. If you can't get out of that valley, maybe it's not for you. But if you get out of that valley and you figure out a way to kind of make the asset better, that's what's important. But all your models will go there. They'll all go into the Valley of Suck. And that is unfortunate, but it just happens. Animators, same thing. It's not just modelers. Anybody that's doing anything, there is that point where just things feel off. And a little bit of refinement and starts to get better. So this is in that valley. Like, no big deal. And I'm going to make it look worse to fix it. That's another thing that I guess people don't really understand. It's like, well, I need to fix this. Let's see what that does. Fix some of it. Let's fix some more. Okay, so now we've got the pancaking taken care of. Just going to kind of expand that. So now I can go back in with my move tool Just kind of jam all this stuff up. I'm gonna go control and kind of hold the front of the leg in place. Just gonna jam, just like, I don't even care. Just gonna push that all in there, smooth it out, update, smooth it out, update. Now we're back into something I can manage. Right, so we have to kind of take the model through that process to fix. And even if I was at a lower resolution, it'd be the same thing. So I'm gonna go back down to a lower resolution. Just so I have an easier time working. And again, don't forget things like, hey, I need to move this leg. Right, so what I did was I masked it, I hit control on the model. You see it's fading off the edge, so it gives me a smoother transition. I'm going to click in space to invert. I'm going to grab my regular old move tool. Now it likes to go somewhere else than where you want it to go. Just click the little GPS tag. That'll center it on the selection, and then I can move it. Right, so kind of a good way to maneuver through your models. And I'm probably just going to go right back, smooth that out. Updating my Dynamesh. Now I'm starting to get to the point where Dynamesh is losing some of my nice shape. Right, as I update it, it seems to be simplifying some of the stuff more so than I want it to. So I'm going to have to start taking that into consideration. Never forget that I was giving somebody a critique. I gave them all this information, and they literally looked at me and said, "I'll take that into consideration. Thanks." I'm like, well, if you want a better grade, I would do more than just consider it. I would correct it. And they're like, oh no, I didn't mean that. It was kind of. I knew they weren't trying to be jerks, but. It was kind of fun.
Huh. I'll just continue.
Yeah, I mean, there was one time, everybody knows that I like to joke around. There was one time I was in, I'm not like, yeah, I love to crush people, yeah, and all that. But people knew who, you know, and I knew who could take this kind of fun and who couldn't. But, you know, there was one guy, he hated it. He hated me in a friend way, kind of thing. And he always be like, hey, what do you think? What do you think? And I'd be like, you know what? What I would try and do is maybe delete what you have, do it over, but with a little bit of talent.
Oh my God.
And he would be so upset. He'd be like, oh man, I hate you. And I'm like, I know, I'm just kidding. Let me look at your model. And that was back in the day when I had 5 a.m.s all the time. It was much different.
That was the best advice ever.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
I was there that day, I would have just started a lot.
No, we're talking 2003, 2004. People were a little more thick skinned, I guess. You know, back then.
So much for YouTube.
But definitely not so easy. Alright, so I'm just kind of working on this, and just pulling shape. I'm going to introduce you to some really cool tools today as well, other than the cool stuff you've already seen. Do some more. Wait, there's more. What's that? No. Yeah. Now watch it. This is going to be another way. I'm going to go control and just mask off the front of the foot, invert it with the move tool, and just pull that forward. All right, this is another good way. Update, and you've got polish ready for the foot. All right, so one of those ways. If you want to scale it, you can either move it or, you know, something like this. Grab scale, center it to your model. You can, oh, that's not going to work. Fine, let's do a little bit more. Okay, there comes a time when you're like, hey, you know what, I really want to have flatter feet on this character. It's just not, I just want the feet to look better. So let's look at some other tools that are the first thing is, let's think beyond what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more resolution just because as you start saying, I want cleaner structures, well, cleaner structures equals more topology. There's only one way, it's the only way you're going to get it. So I'm going to go in here and just bring the foot down a little bit beyond that plane. So let's say we're dealing with something like this, right? Remember, if I hold control and I mask that off, I can invert that. I can grab move or scale, center it, okay, and I can either just translate these up. I'm actually going to use the old school move. Let's get rid of the gizmo. All right, this is the old 3 seashell tool. You got your anchors. Some of you might be familiar with this one already. We're getting a little spoiled with the Gizmo 3D, but sometimes these work a little better. And right now you've got the positioning icons. These allow you to move it and position it, and then you've got the actual operators. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, let me put a lock here, an anchor point here, and then let me translate all of those points up. So it's kind of we've done this in Maya, right? Where you've scaled things flat together to kind of flatten an edge out. Right? So that works out really good. And then control again, let it update, and you've got the start of a flat front foot. Okay? And the way these work is, this is kind of a positioner. You have to be careful with that. You know, this is move in X, Y, and Z. These are translate to the anchor point. In scale, it's the same thing based on the orientation of this tool. It's going to scale different ways. So let's just look at the character. And if I draw this down, and I grab the middle and I scale, I'm scaling based off of that. If I draw across the character, and I scale, I'm scaling up and down. So that's kind of like your middle line. Right? And then rotate is the same way. If I rotate from the center, it's more like twisting. Treat this like an axle. If I draw like this and I rotate, it's working off of a pivot point, right? Whatever that pivot point is. Or you've got Gizmo 3D and you just do what it's doing. Okay. All right, so far we're getting that. You know, you can already see that we're getting some instant shape, whereas with Z-spheres, it would still look like a tube. It looked like it was made out of PVC pipe. Right? So, shift B. You don't have to have your wireframe on all the time. I don't know why. Just as I'm demonstrating, it was tend to happen. Now it's time to go ahead and pull the arms, but I'm going to show you some other stuff. This is acceptable. Using insert mesh brushes is not acceptable. So insert mesh hand, insert mesh arm, insert mesh face. None of that is acceptable, okay? Instant grounds for failing the class and academic dishonesty. But you can use, especially with Dynamesh, things like curved tubes for appendages. Okay, some people like this more than trying to pull and shape as you go because they're worried about the pancaking. If you are worried about the pancaking, remember though, just like I did the toe, that I can come in here, grab a brush, I'm going to use the move. I can come in here, hold control, mask off an area, invert, and then move that out, and it will actually act like it's supposed to. So if I go in here and say, hey, let's take off Gizmo, go ahead and drag that down, I can pull arms, and it pulls more like a log structure out that I can work with. But let's say you don't want to do any of that. You're like, no, I want to use that tool for the show. I want to bend the arms a little bit more. What I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize curved tubes, okay? So when you're dealing with curved tubes, one, it does not like anything with subdivisions, okay? But thank goodness Dynamesh doesn't work that way. It deals with resolution, so it's a little bit different. But basically, you can come in here and say, I want walls. Okay, those look good. But first thing I would tell you, if you want to get into using curved tubes, is get used to using curved tubes. Okay, don't try and make anything right away. So basically, let's look at them a little bit. Functionality, we're going to do Mull from the Wildcats. I'm working on one of those. He's got cones. Okay, so when you draw them, you can tell that it masks off everything. Always be observant what's happening on screen. This turns darker because it's masking that off. It's important to note that when you're working with something like this, it is physically creating another part of your subtool. Okay, now with Dynamesh, as soon as you Dynamesh this, it will push that surface together. It will merge these two together. Now, with these tools, if you change your brush size, and then update, you can see that we get different sizes. If we change the intensity, we will flatten this out a little bit. Okay? If you hover, you'll notice that you get the light blue icon. If you want to change the size of that, sometimes I like a larger brush, sometimes I like a smaller one. Just make sure that the light blue icon is active and then hit the S key so you can change the size of it. This is completely independent of your actual draw icon. They are different. But this will allow you to position and move. I'm just real happy. Those hands up in the He does not care. But a lot of people ask, well, what if I want to continue drawing? You'll notice that if you hold on the end and you pull forward a little bit, you'll see a little red line kind of pop up. That'll allow you to continue your line. Okay? If you hold shift, you go ahead and set that. I'm just going to click on the surface. That will set that icon. If you're drawing and you hold shift, it should connect both sides. Should. Over. Connect. Oh. Obviously, it doesn't fit there. Okay. Make our brush a little small. I'm going to put that to go around. Let's see, it's a little bit of a bugger. You see it created a closed ring. So he's got his leg floaties on and he will leave his arm floaties if he's going to be allowed to go on into the slide. Right? So going back to these, I'm just undoing, and we get these here. You can also change the shape. So if I go under stroke, curve, curve functions, curve modifiers. So I'm going to focus on curve, and you'll see we have a locked end and a locked start. So if I wanted to lock the shoulder where it was at, I would turn that on so I don't pull the shoulder out of place. And this comes more into play when we start doing hair and stuff like that. You can draw these out and lock the start curve of the curve so you can kind of work with it. The big one, though, that people really like is under curve modifiers, turn on size, and then curve fall off. This is where you now can control the curve. So what is it telling? This is the start of the curve, this is the end of the curve. So if I update them, you'll see that it starts full strength at the top, tapers down to nothing. So it actually is reverse what we would want. We go back to stroke, we're going to go ahead and grab that little thing, bring this down, and we can start playing around with stuff. So let's say bicep, elbow. Yeah, kind of. Right? I'd probably just shape it if it were me. But you can see, you get some functionality there. I want to keep them normal. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn off size. I don't need that. Let's actually just do those all together because we want to put them on for arms. Okay, so I'm just gonna work with them roughly. Brush a little bigger. As long as you have some kind of a bend. So that can give you the arm a little bit more. Okay, bring back our reference. You can see we're lined up. That worked out pretty nice. Okay, and once I have this, I'm going to go ahead and set it by clicking on the model. And then we're going to clear our thing, the mask. And then we're going to update it, and you'll see that it dynameshes it into the surface. More resolution you have, the harder it will be to blend these things together, because you're going to have a lot of geometry trying to hold that shape up there. Some people like to drop down in resolution. I'd be leery of that, because if you've got a detail that's reliant on that higher resolution, not really leery, just watch. Just keep an eye on it. Make sure that you're not dropping down too much to where you're killing any of your surface. Now, his arm, we're going to pretend that he's got, let's say it's really close. Right, even that, it might grab it. Yep, you see how it kind of pinched that together. That will happen. You have to be careful. If it happens and you really need the structure, then I would recommend upping your resolution, but be careful. You don't want to go too high, too fast. You end up with unmanageable topology. The other thing you could do is move the arm out to the side a little. Remember, we talked about it. If this was really something I was modeling, I probably would have, in my reference, pushed the arms out a little bit more to keep me from having to worry about fusing that structure together. So with this, let's say I'm modeling it and I need just something to temporarily allow the arm to go. We could try, sometimes if you hold control with one of these and you draw it out again, sometimes it'll give you a decent auto masking, or at least something to start with, and then we can soften this up. So I'm going to hit Control, click on the surface a bunch of times to kind of get that nice gradient, and then I can position this down here, make sure the shoulder's where it's at. I can say, let's move that arm out a little bit. It's never going to be perfect, but at least now the arm's a little bit further away from the model. What should I be careful of at this point? It doesn't match my reference. So this is going to make life a little harder for me to try and make sure that I match these things. One of the things you can do is you can utilize these markers as measuring tools or just sight measure. If you are going to be moving something away from the reference, it still needs to be accurate. I really don't recommend doing it. Maybe to establish it, but then putting it back where it's supposed to go, or realizing I need to change my reference and then reload it into the scene. But sight measuring works out really nice. Right? And you can also get into side-by-side critiques or going into Photoshop and running yourself some guides. But I'm going to undo that because I just want to work with it. Now, I'm going to go in here and get into the inflate tool. Remember, I told you the inflate tool is really good for getting rid of some volume. Right? His arm is obviously big up top, but not that much at the wrist. So I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to deflate the bottom of the arm. I have the body mask off, which is good. It's going to help me out. And you can see we're running into some issues there. I'm going to go ahead and just let that ease up. Smooth it. And then we'll shape the rest of it. No problem. Sometimes puns are actually fully intended. Now, when people are getting into shaping, I just updated my time crunch. When they get into shaping arms, you know, you'll notice on the finished version, or not really finished, but the other version of him with all of this stuff. I've got some anatomy placed in his arm. One, it helps me see the orientation of the arm. Right? When people start reading, they start looking at their images, they fail to identify what is the front of the arm. They think that, well, here's the front of the arm. So they put the bicep there. Even though if I'm somewhat understanding anatomy, right, the arms twist a little bit as they hang forward. They twist. The elbow, even though the back of the arm is now pointed 45 degrees out, the inside bicep is pointed 45 degrees into the body. It's not pointing straight. So think about your orientation, and you might want to identify some of that anatomy to help with that. Okay. I'm pretty sure you're getting the process here. You would then continue to sculpt. You know, I would add maybe a little bit more. I think we're sitting 34,000, so we're still doing pretty good geometry-wise. I might go up a little bit more to add in some of the, you know, like the not the breastplate, but the belly plate, and then maybe identify the robes, you know, put some bagginess into the pants, you know, that kind of stuff. But, you know, the head's the same thing. Control, mask that off, invert, move. I'm going to go to the gizmo. Selection, and you're going to rotate. I want you to try Alt. So the one thing with this tool, okay, there we go. It is still kind of new, and I haven't poked around with all the buttons, but one of the things that people complain about is its orientation. So what I did there, if you hold Alt, right, we did mention this the other day, you can move where you want this thing to be. So my workflow there, as it was kind of off to the side, was you'll notice, right, again, being observant, if I click this, it says reset to origin. What's it doing? It's actually rotating my selection. I don't want it to do that, so I'm going to hold Alt to let it move independently. You see that it's unlocking the icon, allowing it to unlock independently of the actual mesh. So now I can just go ahead and pull that structure up. Update my topology. I'm going to go ahead and mask off this. Invert, make it a little softer. Inflate, give myself a little bit of geometry to work with. And scale it up a little bit. And position it. Control, and the rest is done by brushing it a little smaller. Smooth that out. That worked out pretty nice. Got a little bit of neck in there. Symmetry is still on. As far as the head goes, right, we're not looking for anything crazy. We're looking for some nice shape. Something that would be head. Oh no. Oh no. What is that? In secret, I got rid of symmetry. Okay, because this happens a lot, and people are like, what do I do now? Well, we got to fix it. Okay, so what is that process going to look like? Well, what did I tell you earlier about? Let's break down with questions. What do we know? What do we have? What do we need? What side mirrors? The side that I spent time shaping? The other one. Okay, so what do we need to do? flip the mesh, okay? We gotta figure out how to do that. Now, there are different ways, but I'm gonna show you the easy one. Deformation, we're gonna use this mirror. This might get confusing because we're using two different types of mirror, but we're gonna mirror the object. Deformation mirrors the object. Now, one thing I do wanna check first, right, let's say that along the way we've accidentally moved the object in that mirror. Now, obviously, I can see a problem here, right? It's jumping. It should not jump. It should just kind of flip at the origin. So before I do anything, I'm going to go to Geometry, Position, and you can see X, Y, Z. It's just X, Y, Z. Okay? So I'm going to go here and click on the X. Don't worry, it's going to jump out in space. Just type in 0. And now we are centered. Okay? Nice way to position the model. So now we can go back to deformation. And we can do mirror. You can see that just flips. Okay, so we're going to put that over there, the side that we want to take. So now we've flipped the mesh. We're going to go to Geometry. Modify Topology. A lot of cool things under Modify Topology. Right? Delete Hidden is one of them. We'll talk about that next week. And then there is also Mirror and Weld. So we tell the mirror and weld in the X-axis. We are centered. You can see that boom. Now it's not going to be 100% perfect unless you make 100% perfect, but you know, I see people that are like, oh, I've been shaping and I accidentally, because you're zoomed in, you might have hit the X key. It happens, but now, you know, we can work on it. And also think about, I don't want to be working and hitting the F key and seeing everything. I just want to focus here and model one hand. Let me just do one hand. And then I can mirror that over to the other side. So now this might open up a pathway to your workflow. Right? Maybe you focus on one side and mirror that over. Maybe it's easier for you than working with symmetry all the time. I do believe, though, when you're establishing the width of the character, it's very crucial to be working on both sides. But if you find something's not working, you could just pull one side, pull an arm off of one side, pull a leg off of one side, make sure they look good, then mirror it over. Then you can mirror anytime you want. It's not like a once and done. You know, mirror it over, you look at it, go, hey, that's looking pretty good. Then you pull the hand out and you mirror it over again, so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to go up here and fix whatever's going on there. Interesting chin. Oh, and I'm doing the same thing. Just updating that. Same thing through here. And go to smooth. Using a small brush, so it's going to take a little bit more. Update. Okay. I'm going to bring back my wireframe and not my wireframe, but my in there. And, oh man, that's not really working. Matches the side, but it's not matching the front. We are going to go more to the front though. I'm going to make it work here. A little bit of scroll. That's it. Right? And we pull trapezius up a little bit more because we need those. That's going to be tough to follow. Going to use that for major stuff. Pull that bicep down a little bit. Bring that pec structure into play. I haven't done anything really but move in some very basic brushes. want you to kind of note that. Flexors and extensors there on the bicep. Okay. Let's go ahead and hide that so we can take a look. All right, now the shoulder's not working. So once you get to your volumes and you're like, all right, I want to bring this a little bit further, now you can start thinking about anatomy. All right, we know that the deltoid, I'm going to stop right about here. It's going to come up and it's going to connect to the clavicle. Real down, coming off that scapula. I'm not going to go crazy with this. I'm just trying to get it. So when I'm working on the bicep, I can make it feel like it actually is tucking underneath all that structure. The pec, you've got clavicle head, and all that goes underneath there. Build that up. And sometimes you got to carve into a model. It's not always about pulling the structure out. Clavicle head, and then the sternal head. And if you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, I tell you, go back and redo your orthoanatomy study. You didn't do it right. I mean, you don't need to know clavicle head and sternal head, but you need to understand pec structure and where the patch is and where it goes. And I'm not looking for accuracy 100%, I just need something to read a little better. Even there, we're still not getting that deltoid. Build the bicep going in a little bit. And then we push in a little bit more. And look at it from different angles. Make sure that you're happy. But don't spend too much time on anatomy, right? We're just looking for volume, we're looking for something readable. All right, we go and we start working on it, we're just kind of pushing it a little bit further, making sure that we're establishing the. And what do I need to do? I started pulling some volume out of that shoulder. What should I do? No, not how would I pull. What do I need? I've sculpted out some structure. I pulled more volume out of that shoulder. What do I need to always double check?
You say it?
Your other perspectives?
What?
Your other perspectives?
Okay, I do want to look at it from more than just my angles, you know. What? Reference. Yeah, I want to make sure I'm on reference because I pulled out some volume. Did I destroy it? Did I oh, look, you know, I pulled the shoulder out a little bit wonky. Do I need to push that back in? Biceps. Looks like it's holding pretty good where it is. So always go back to your reference. That's, you know, if anybody's watched Thumb Wars, it's thumbs with faces on them that reenact Star Wars. And in one of the scenes, right, they're going down the Death Star, that channel, and they shoot the mine, and it goes through the thermal port and blows the whole thing up. But he's like, how many do you trust the Force, you know? And then the Yoda version, or the Obi-Wan Kenobi version of the thumb comes up and he goes, no, use the instruments, that's what they're made for, you know? It's like, use your reference, that's what it's there for, you know? I see too many people way off a reference. I'm like, are you even looking at your reference? Or you just kind of have it over here, and it's a poster on your wall that you glance at once in a while. Reference makes this so much easier, because you know what it needs to match. Right? Yes. Yeah.
And I thought it was really good. I thought it was something that you could understand.
Oh, no, I have the whole box set. It's called All Thumbs. It's got Blair Thumb, Bat Thumb, God Thumb, Franken Thumb,
Okay, so
uh,
not.
Thumb
That
Tanning,
is something I
and
watched as a
yeah,
kid.
Thumb Wars. If anybody wants to watch them sometime,
I think.
we can go in and watch all of them. They're great. They're a little bit weird when you watch them the first time. You're like, I'm freaked out. Is this funny? Is it not funny? All right, so you saw my process, working through, making sure that I'm hitting certain parts of the model. I'm kind of, always big forms first, establishing everything, and then I would go into marking. Right? I want to bring it up, whether it be, whether you're working on something that is, make sure I get the right, you can see this one here. Whether you're working on Z-spheres or Dynamesh, your target, finished target should be roughly the same. So you can see here a little bit of anatomy, some of those side skirts there. You can see the leg. Right, and then we continue to evolve this next week. Face, same thing, right? We don't have a lot of face structure in there. Just kind of a basic shape. We don't have fingers, we've got just a mitten hand. But it's some readable, right? It still feels, you blur your eyes, it kind of feels like that character minus the secondary asymmetrical items. Okay? So either way, you're going, or whatever you're using to build, you're going to want to hit the targets the same way. All right, so let's talk about some other brushes really quickly. We're going to look at another way to help you. Hopefully his arm turned out better this time than the last one did. How to manage your scene a little bit. We're going to talk about hiding. Did Christian show hiding and unhiding parts of your model, making polygroups or polygroups in general? By your silence, I was saying no. All right, so one of the things that helps as you're going through a model is being able to focus on something. So Control and Shift, marquee selecting and letting go, that will, it's like a view selected. Okay, so now when I hit the F key, it's going to frame that item. And when you start getting into refining shape, right? Again, building, I'm going to try and go symmetrical build, keep symmetry turned on. But now I want to work on the boot, make the boot look a little better, refine its shape, not modeling the boot, but I'm going through and kind of trying to hit its core shape a little bit more. Well, in that case, I'm going to go in, I'm going to turn off symmetry. And I'm turning off symmetry because when I hit the F key, I want to look at just that one boot and shape. Please be careful. Anything you do to the model while hidden, while the part's hidden, it's going to only work on the visible object, which is a good thing in some cases and a bad thing in others. So if I come in here and I start messing with the shape, and I bring back the model, so Control, Shift, click, and space, it's going to bring back everything. You can see that it does not update beyond the hidden area. So if you are going to go this route to help isolate an area, work a little bit beyond, right? Select a little bit beyond, so you have kind of a buffer zone. If you subdivide, you're working on your Z-sphere model and you accidentally subdivide while the model is partially hidden, you will only subdivide that one area. That's not a good thing, especially in the earlier procedures, because you now have different resolution sections. Okay, so that's one thing there. Now, if you want to invert your selection, let's say you want to hide the hand because it's easier, but you want to look at the wrist connection, you go Control Shift and you click on the visible object. It will hide that and unhide everything else. And then Control Shift click and space again brings everything back. Now, on a Z-sphere model, right? If I go Adaptive Skin, Shift E, or Shift F, sorry, for wireframe. You'll notice that there's all these colors. These colors are polygroups, okay? And polygroups work well for managing your asset. They also work for other operations later on down the road. Maybe for like week 2, we might polygroup an area to separate the model, to panel loop, to do something to it. So I'm going to go ahead and just make this polymesh there. So now if I go Control and Shift and I click on a polygroup, you can see that it isolates everything but that polygroup. Okay, so that's a nice quick way if I want to work on the arm, but I don't want to constantly select this area. I can make it a polygroup. And you can make polygroups any way you want, any time you want. So the way we can make a custom polygroup, there are other ways, but this is usually the quickest. If you mask off an area, in this case I want to wipe out all my Z-sphere polygroups because I want custom ones that I can work on parts of the body with. So mask it off, then Control W. That will mask, it's a hotkey for masking off of or polygroup off of mask. Okay? So let's use that on I'll bring back another model. Him. Right? Now he already has arm polygroups. Why? How did I build the arms?
With the noodle tool.
The noodle tool. That works. You remember it, that's fine. The noodle tool. Yes, so it automatically, when you jam pieces together in Dynamesh, it will polygroup them separately. That is kind of a plus and maybe something to think about while you're building. But let's say you need to make a custom polygroup. Again, Control. Let's make the brush a little smaller. Control. X on. New version of that. Okay? Control W, and I get a polygroup out of that information. Right? That'll be really beneficial for next week for doing certain things. Now, it's always going to be faceted. One thing with that, I'm going to bring back another asset. This model has subdivisions in it. So when you're making polygroups, be careful of subdivisions. Why? I'm going to take this back up to its top subdivision. I'm going to make a cool polygroup. Not really super cool. Stitch. Right? So I'm going to go Control W. I'm going to make that polygroup. Now, the polygroups you can see work off of the resolution. So one of the ideas of getting a cleaner polygroup is you need more resolution. Kind of. Another way you can do it is by utilizing the polygroup menu. And you'll see group mask, which is all when we hit Control W. When we mask and hit Control W, we're just activating group mask. So there's a polish slider next to it. If you grab that and you say, hey, I want to polish the edge of this mask, when I convert Control W, you'll see that. You'll see that now we get a smoother edge. Okay? But, watch. What did I say in the beginning before I did this, I wanted to show you something, that this had multiple subdivisions. I'm going to go down in subdivision. That's level 1. And you're like, oh, no, I don't want that. Let me go back up. It broke. Right? It's completely broken. It's broken because when you're polygrouping, it respects the lowest subdivision level, always. And this usually bites people. Like, yeah, I had this really nice polygroup, and then when I extracted or I did an operation, it gave me this real jagged edge. And what happened? It's because you had subdivisions. So if you are going to start doing something like this, if you are going to, so you're at the point where you're like, I want to really kind of start refining the hand shape. I've got the whole character out. It's blocked out pretty nicely. Now I just need to do some refining on the shapes, and I want to start focusing on areas. So let me polygroup some areas really quick. At that point, you shouldn't need subdivisions anymore, up to where you're at. You might add subdivisions later, but for this, you maybe say, I don't need them. If you're working with Dynamesh topology, it's not really going to matter because Dynamesh is its own thing if it's not working with subdivisions. So if you're in that case, what I would recommend you do is delete your subdivisions at that point. Now remember, I'm not saying go and delete your subdivisions and kind of hose yourself. But what I'm saying is when you need to, you're going to want to delete subdivisions. Utilizing things like the curved tubes on a mesh with subdivisions. Right? It's like, no thank you. Okay, and something, it should be giving me a big warning. It likes to warn me and say, no, you can't do that because there's subdivisions there. So basically, if we're at that point, we're like, hey, you know what? I'm ready to go ahead and make this really cool poly group. Okay, I'm going to go to geometry and I'm going to look at my subdivision and say, you know, I don't need any more. So this guy, I don't think he's geometry. I think it's just I already worked with him. So let me add some subdivisions in here. Okay, but you'll see now you have delete lower. So if you're running into a problem, bring it up to where you are comfortable. You may not be the top one, it may not be the bottom one, but find the subdivision that let's say it was 2. I want to be at subdivision 2 from this point on. That's a good poly count for me. I'm going to delete lower and delete higher, and this becomes my base topology, so it will respect that. Make sense? Okay, good. I hope so. There's going to be a test tomorrow. We'll send it to you via email. Just kidding. So where did my go? Okay, so working with polygroups is pretty cool, and there's one other way I'm going to introduce you to curves. Not the curve tube or curve strap. Right? Curve strap is really good for belts and things. But I'm going to look at using different kinds of curves. So you'll notice that you have a couple brushes. And again, we're now venturing into next week's territory. So some of these are good for shaping certain things. Remember I showed you how to flatten the foot by moving the topology? Well, I can use a clip curve to clip the geometry. I can use a trim curve to trim off a section of a model. I can use the slice curve to slice through a section of the model, giving me a really clean polygon. Okay, so and the reason I bring all these up at one time is once you know how to use one curve and you understand what the operation is, you know how to use all of them. Okay, so first thing we'll do is look at the bottom of this foot, and I'll show you the flip, and then we'll get into now we're on polygons. We're on polygons. We'll talk about the slice. Okay, that sound good? Okay, since we're talking about polygons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the slice curve tool. Okay. Now, first thing, I'm switching to my secondary brush. So this means that when I hit Control and Shift, it will activate that secondary brush. It does ignore it when you're trying to mask off an area. It should allow you to just hit a mask with Control. That's the only problem. But hiding stuff isn't going to work the same. You know, that kind of stuff. So I just hit OK. And then I'm going to go Control and Shift and just draw a line, just to show you what it does. Now holding Shift will allow you to snap it, right? But I can let go of Control. Once I have this out, left mouse button, click and drag, or click on your tablet and drag. I can move it. If I hold Shift, I get snapping. If I hold the space bar, I can move my line to a different location. Okay, and then I let it go. Once I let it go, you can see that it's sliced through the model. I'll talk about that other side here. And it's giving me a really nice line. It's triangulated where it needs to, just kind of slice through it. So let's look at a little bit more functionality here. I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to say that I want to give him some sort of a line through his belt, a little draping line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my curve. I'm going to hit Option. I'm going to hit Option twice. It gives me, see the difference? Clicking it once gives me a spline. Clicking it twice gives me a linear tangent. Now, if I can't get this right, what would I do? You would do one side and then mirror it open, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let that rip. And this happens. You see what it did? We were asking quite a bit out of the model. So it was like, excuse me, what is that? I'm going to give you this crazy polygon. It's kind of cool. It's kind of like war paint. But you can see it did a pretty good job around his pants there. So now I can grab that. And if I want to, right, I can fix this. Watch this. Control, Marquee Select mask over that, Control W, make it a new poly group. It does look very similar. The colors, unfortunately, we can't pick, and sometimes it picks one little shade up or down from where you're at, makes it confusing. I'm gonna go Control and Shift, click in space to bring everything back, Control and Shift, hide, invert, select, Control W, Control and Shift click, bringing everything back like this. Okay? I am not separating the model here. All I'm doing is making a collection of polygons that will utilize certain tools or allow me to manage the surface. Next week, we'll be doing this kind of stuff to help separate or split, because I can split the model based off of polygroups. So sometimes you go through and make some really nice polygroups and you extract everything off and it rips the model into pieces based off those polygroups. There's also other things like panel looping, which will take each polygroup and give you a slight bevel, almost like an extrusion and a bevel. So it's really nice for mechanical paneling or clothing seams. So there's a lot of cool things we can do with it. Now, if I was working on the shoulder and I was like, hey, I really wanted that shoulder, Control and Shift. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to hit Option. Try to let that rip through the shoulder. Get that. Remember, if I want this on both sides, which I probably wouldn't, I still am in the habit of working on the wrong side. I would just go deformation. Flip my model. And then I can mirror and weld, and it's going to maintain polygroup on both sides if that's something I was worried about. All right, so I'm just showing you this to help organize or isolate certain areas of your model. Again, next week we'll look at how to actually use this in the modeling process. So I just want to make that clear as to why I'm doing this. Do you have to do this? No, not at all. It's just getting into this another brush. Okay, so those are great for slicing through the model, giving yourself really nice clean polygroups. Now let's look at one last thing, and then we'll be getting out of here. Let's say I wanted a little bit more accurate line on the bottom of that foot. Okay, we are still in Dynamesh. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control. I'm going to select that. I'm going to invert it, grab Move, Switch. Just pull that down. Clear. Okay. And I want to get that more rocky, that kind of rocked up toe shape. So I'm going to switch, and I'm going to use, instead of slice, right, that just gives me polygroups, I'm going to use clip curve. Functionality is exactly the same. The main difference with this one is when I drop my curve, I have to pay attention to where the gray line is, because that'll tell me where I'm clipping. Okay, so let's say I go like this. Where's the foot? It's still there. Okay, let's go the other direction. Where's my character? He's still there. Well, what's happened? I've clipped all the topology down to that line. It's almost like a big giant magnet that says all you points come down to this line. Let's clip you here.
Does it just cross the match down?
Yep, that's all it does. So it is something to be mindful of. If I were to Dynamesh that, I'm going to get this big flat plane of topology. It's going to be kind of weird. But for something like this, to refine an edge, I'm going to start this way. I'm probably not going to try and get that little indent. We can want to try it. Let's try it. What's the worst it's going to be? Double tap, double tap, double tap. Single tap. I'm going to talk about the Option key. I don't know. It's going to give me a little bit of okay. Okay. So we look at the topology. It hasn't done anything, and as soon as I update it, it's going to go ahead and eat up any bad crushing of topology. Right. This is really good. If you're not using Dynamesh and you're doing this, you will be literally flattening out your topology. So if it's creating weird topology, that will be an issue. So you have to be careful with that. A maneuver like that isn't really going to, it shouldn't cause any kind of issues. Alright, so a nice way to kind of refine some edges. And then the other one that I told you about was trim. And there was a trim curve. This one's interesting. Let me take off the wireframe. I really need to see that. Should be here. Let's say that I was like, man, I really don't like that arm. Let's see if I can get this to work. Same thing, Alt. Now let's say I didn't like the positioning, hold space bar and I can move that over a little bit. Totally cut it off. Now you'll notice that I'm trying to start my line outside the model and end my line outside the model. That sometimes saves you from having it rip through the model and do something you don't like. And sometimes these work beautifully and sometimes they're not the best. Now let's look at wireframe. So let's evaluate what it did. Flip it off. Trimmed it off and gave me a new poly group. Might be useful. But now I can just Dynamesh that, pull the arm out again. Right? So this is a nice way to kind of trim off. You made a mistake, you want to get rid of it. Okay. And if we're like, oh man, let me shape this arm a little bit here, because you could technically trim the whole. Let's go Maya style. Get some weirdness right there through the neck. That's all right. Get rid of it. Get rid of that. Now I'm going to go in here. Geometry. Modify topology. Delete it. That'll get rid of that funkiness in the middle. But it did allow me to cut the character out. Now let's see what we get rid of that. Oh man. Yeah, it worked.
I think that tool always fills in empty space when you cut, doesn't it?
So sometimes you use it to slice, then you delete whatever weirdness it gave you. Okay? And then I can update, clean, work with my font, keep going. So this is something that is, a lot of that stuff there is something that has made the world of navigating ZBrush or modeling in ZBrush difficult for other people. Because they're like, well, Maya, I could just delete this other half. How do I do it here? You know, we do have a lot of flexibility. We can mirror, we can weld, we can trim off, we can flip, slice, you know. Never get worried and be like, my model's toast, I have to do this all over again. We can usually fix and bring it back to life, okay? So yeah, the other thing is anybody that really just, they don't like whenever you open up subtool, it closes geometry, and then when you open up geometry, it closes the other one. Is that kind of annoying? Okay. If that's annoying, go to preferences. Go to interface, palettes, and turn off open subpalette. Once you do that, geometry still open. This way you can turn on the ones you like and just kind of scroll. It does equal more scrolling, but it keeps it from bouncing all over the place. Okay. Cool. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Keep on pushing and working on your assets. Right, remember, focus really on those two. Make sure the other four are completed. You've got your